Section 10, Chapters 33 through 36. In this section, Clea and I discuss and expand on dealing with rejection, realizing fear, and the golden nugget in being rejected. We talk about the sacred creative space in where you create and setting up your art studio. We also go into detail on my daily habits of a madman, and Clea expands on some of her own daily habits. Clea shares a lot of her personal struggles and some insights that she's gleaned from them in this section.
Let's talk about rejection and dealing with rejection, shall we?
Oh yeah, rejection. Rejection is a great subject to talk about, especially if you want to do this art career thing.
Oh, yeah. So here's a funny thing. Well, it's not funny, haha, but it's something that I've looked at. I totally thought that I was not afraid of rejection for like the longest time. I was like, I'm brave. I put myself in our YouTube videos. I do things. And I realized at some point that I actually was very afraid of rejection. I'm brave, but at the same time, I found myself playing it really safe in a lot of areas, which is essentially a form of avoiding rejection.
Oh yeah.
Because rejection can take a lot of forms, whether it's direct rejection, like you get denied for a commission or a show or whatever. Rejection can be criticism. It can be a negative review online. It can be lack of response to social media, to putting yourself out there. It can be a lot of different things. And essentially, by not doing some of those things, I was almost like pre-rejecting myself by not sharing my stuff.
Exactly.
So that's been a journey for me of like, if I find myself wanting to avoid doing something based on any of those potential things, then is this fear of rejection? And so I've been making efforts to try to do things that maybe I'm scared to do because of rejection.
It's interesting because like unless we really investigate and take a look at that fear, the fear of rejection, a lot of times we do things and we don't even realize that we're playing it safe.
Yeah, and so sometimes it's accompanied by like other excuses. Well, it's not fear of rejection, it's this. And I've looked at that because like I've done a lot of brave things. I've sang for rock bands. I've gone on adventures. I left with you on our adventure. We've started this whole art career. I do YouTube. Then with music, sometimes I find myself dragging my feet. And
Right.
it is in part fear of rejection, and it is other things too, but it's like music seems to take the back burner because I have a million other things going on. When really it's more like music is where I feel more vulnerable. So it's a little harder to get me to do the music thing.
It's almost like you're pre-rejecting yourself, and so you're staying away from doing stuff because of your own fear.
Yeah, I'll give you a good example. I pre-rejected myself when it comes to writing. So like I've wanted to and thought about writing like blogs and short articles about things that I personally care about. And before I even get started, I think I wrote one blog in like the decade that we've been doing this, and it took me like a full day, and it was this big endeavor. And then I was sweating bullets when it was time to like post the blog. And I have a lot of stuff that I want to talk about. And of course, we talk about a lot of the topics, me and you. But when it comes to me sitting down and writing, I never do it. It's like I pre-qualify that this is not going to be any good. And then I just don't do it. And that's like these faceless, nameless humans out there that are going to read this and say, you're stupid.
Yeah.
This article sucks.
I would say that when it comes to ourselves, right? Because there's people out there and they're going to reject us all the time. But I would say that the one form of rejection that is going to actually stop you, it's not somebody telling you that you're not good enough or that this sucks or whatever. It's actually the voice in your own head that the amalgamation of thousands or billions of voices in your head of this audience, this faceless audience that you have that while you're thinking about writing something, that you got one person telling you, well, that's not any good, this isn't any good, that isn't any good. It's almost like you have this small community of dysfunctional people in your brain that are telling you that that's not going to work. Just avoid it. Just don't do it. If you put it out there, you know what? It's not good enough. You're not interesting. It's not interesting, whatever. All these reasons that you tell yourself not to do something, a lot of the time, we don't even realize that that in of itself is rejection, and that the reason that we're not doing something is because we are afraid of that rejection, that imaginary rejection, whether or not it's actually something that you think is actually going to happen, or whether or not you are protecting yourself from that, from feeling that pain of rejection, because rejection is painful, but it's not the end all be all.
I would say you're right, and that 90% of the time, what you have going on in your head is way worse than any actual rejection.
Oh, yeah.
Now, the other 10%, sometimes rejection sucks, and sometimes people say some really whack, hurtful stuff.
Right.
And then sometimes, when you're in that mindset where you're already defeated before you're out the gate, sometimes I've actually mistakenly interpreted what was not rejection as rejection.
Right.
Because I was in that headspace.
Right, because you're in that headspace. If you're already rejecting yourself, it is very easy to translate anything that anyone else says as a form of rejection.
Yeah, I'll give you a good example. I was reluctant to share my music with a friend for like a little while, and I had built it up so much in my head that when I finally did play some music for her, she had a severe headache, and we had to turn the music off. And from my headspace, I interpreted that as a rejection,
Right.
even though it wasn't. It couldn't be helped. It's not like she was trying to be hurtful. It's just the situation that arose.
And what's interesting about those kind of situations is, like with that in particular, you were able to hindsight be aware of the fact that it wasn't necessarily rejection or anything like that, and so you didn't have to take it personally, right?
Exactly.
Maybe you took it personally at first, but then you thought about it. You worked your way through it. There are so many people out there that don't work their way through that, and so they have that one experience,
And then they shut down.
yeah, then that just gets stacked on top of all the other excuses that they have for rejection. And then once they have that experience, they have more experiences and more experiences, and basically they go through life with all this ammo on why they avoid doing something and why it is that they're afraid of rejection. Because you take that situation with your friend, and if you continue to interpret it as rejection, which it wasn't, but as some form of rejection, then every time you think of showing your music to somebody, you would get nervous, you'd get scared, you'd try to avoid it.
And it would get worse and worse and worse. So in recent years, I've been putting myself in situations where I might be facing rejection. And in a lot of cases, I did face rejection. But then, as you say, and I think one of the most important things for me in this section is, what can I take away from this? What's the golden nugget here that I can learn from said rejection?
Right.
One example was I tried to put a piece in a juried show at an art gallery.
Right.
I was so utterly terrified submitting my piece that I literally, if I could have made myself invisible, dropping the piece off, I would have. I was like I was trying to blend into the wall as much as possible. I submitted my piece, and I don't know for sure what happened, but from what I could determine, my piece didn't get into the show, and I wasn't on their master list. And it seemed as though the juror actually didn't see my piece
Right.
when they went to jury the show. And I thought, that's interesting. I was a little like hurt over not getting in. But it was also like, that's an interesting little golden nugget here. I was trying so hard to be invisible when I dropped off this work that it's very possible that my work itself was invisible to the juror. Like, they missed it.
Yeah.
And so my takeaway was, okay, if you're going to go for it, go for it. Don't try to blend into the wall.
Right.
Because the act of taking it there and presenting it, like, just be proud of what you're doing. And so even though I didn't get into the show, that was the other takeaway, was be proud. Be proud that you tried. And the rejection wasn't that bad.
Right. I had a friend of mine. So there was a time there where there's always these like magazine competition for artists to submit your work and stuff like that. And there's all these like really big events that go on where you could submit your work. And there's a lot of them out there that are scams, but there's a lot of them out there that are legit, right? And so for the longest time, towards the beginning of our career, actually for most of my life of being an artist, I wanted to like submit pieces to these things, but I was so afraid and so nerve-wracked about submitting my pieces that I never actually submitted. And what would happen is I would miss the deadline. There'd be some kind of really, really brilliant excuse on why I couldn't. Oh, I would have really done it, except I couldn't.
I'm very familiar with missing the deadline.
Yeah, and so like a friend of mine, I remember one day I was talking to him, and he's an oil painter. He does portrait paintings. He had come out, had won first place in a magazine. I was like, that's so cool, man. I can't seem to bring myself to do it. Like, it just makes me really nervous. Like, how did you face that? And I remember he looked at me and he smiled. He's like, well, I really don't care. Like, I just kind of put it in there, and if it sticks, it sticks. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Like,
I remember this friend, and I remember him saying, I submit my work to everything. Like,
Yeah.
I just submit to everything. 90% of it is rejection. 10% of it, I'm like, yeah, cool.
it was like a light bulb went off. And I realized that either you spend your time being afraid of being rejected and like really, really making that one event or one situation or one circumstance or one show this big, huge end all be all event, or it's just another thing that you're submitting. So that's where like I started to just submit everywhere. And what's interesting is that the moment that I started doing that and I got to like submission number 5, like it just didn't matter all that much. At that point, I wasn't even like, 'cause, you know, before that I was like, I got to create this new piece and I need to make it all perfect and all this stuff. And after submission number 5, I was like, well, I've got this old piece that's been sitting here for 2 years and this kind of meets the criteria of the competition. So I'm going to submit that. And it just kind of became a game, like buying scratch off tickets. Like, you know, you're not going to win. And if you do win, you're not going to win big, but there is that one chance that you could win. So like submitting to like art events and stuff like that, like art competitions, to me, that's more like doing scratch off tickets. If you turn it into a game, then you don't worry about rejection. And it's not this big life altering event. It's still something you should be proud of. You should be proud of the overall picture of the fact that like, yeah, I'm willing to submit to everywhere. Who knows what'll stick. It's like throwing a dirty sock at the wall. It might stick, it might just slide off. It does. You don't know.
I've seen you submit to a lot of things, and I always love the look of surprise that comes over your face when you win an award. That's always fun.
It does always surprise me because there's a lot of times where I'll submit something and it's like this old work that I did, and I'm thinking to myself like, yeah, you know, I don't have anything, and then that's the one that will get the award, and I'm like, whoa, okay, that's cool.
So really the idea here is like, don't pre-reject yourself. Submit your work, put your stuff out there, be proud that you did, and if you get an honorable mention or an award, that's awesome. If not, it's okay. It's just another part of it.
That's just par for the course. Yeah, rejection is not something that I think any of us should be so afraid of. And I feel like everybody, like, it's such a big deal in school. Like, if you get rejected for being on the team, or you get rejected for this. I mean, they do high school drama television shows based on kids being rejected in school or rejected by their peers and stuff. And like, I think really what that falls into is this whole guideline of like needing to fit in, needing to be normal, needing, you know, wanting people to look at you and say that you are this thing. And if they say, oh no, the art's not good enough, then that all of a sudden means that you're not an artist. I think about a comment on one of the comments that I got. I think it was on a blog that I wrote about individuality and how you can call yourself an artist, and if you do these things. And somebody had said like, you don't call yourself an artist. Someone else has to call you an artist. And I was like, what are you even talking about? Like, I'm just going to go out and call myself a maestro or something like that. I forget what he said. I was like, "A, that's not the same thing. That's like a position in music that you would take. It's
Yes.
not being. You could call yourself a musician if you play the guitar or sing or do whatever like that, and you could call yourself an artist if you want to. You don't need someone else to call you these things. Screw what anybody else thinks."
And the same goes for with all this, like I said in the beginning, not just rejection, like not just you didn't get into the juried show, but criticism, a bad review,
Right.
lack of response on the internet, all those things
Yeah.
that we use as like an arsenal of what ifs against ourselves. And I've had them all. I've had crickets, I've had mean comments, I've had a couple of bad reviews, and I took those as a learning experience. Here's what I could do in the future to make things clearer. And I've been rejected from shows. And
It is really, really interesting how rejection, fear of bad reviews, and things like that plays on your mind. Because even with me, even though I'm not necessarily afraid of being rejected from something, with us listening to the commentary or to the book right now, the audiobook, and going through it and realizing like, oops, I accidentally re-recorded, or when I was doing the recording, there were like 3 chapters so far that it's doubled up and it repeats part of the chapter. And then there was one chapter where the very last word gets cut off at the end. And of course, I'm hypercritical when I'm listening to it, so I could hear all the pop noises and breathing and all this weird stuff. And immediately I'm like, oh, somebody's going to get that and they're going to leave a bad review and they're going to say all these nasty things about my book because of whatever, and what's interesting about that is that I am so not afraid of criticism or rejection. I mean, I am, because everybody is. But I think the non-fear part is the courage to be able to say, you know what? If they do say something, so what?
right.
If they're going to criticize it because there are 3 chapters that double up on themselves and play the same part of the chapter over again, and that really puts them off, then that's their opinion. And if they don't like it, too bad, because so far there have been several hundred people that have listened to it and they thought it was just fine.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, if I wasn't so hypercritical of myself in listening to it, I would be just fine with it. So obviously those kind of mistakes I want to avoid in the future. But once you put an audiobook out there, it's out there. There's no going back. You can't change that.
An audiobook is forever.
Yeah, so from now on, for the rest of a time, my chapters will repeat. So it'll be fun because they'll be like, that was his first book.
Mm-hmm. That was his first book, and perhaps I needed to hear that twice.
Yes,
say.
exactly. But it's interesting because it's looking at those situations from almost like a common sense perspective, right? So like you take your stuff to a gallery and let's say that they reject you. What does it mean? Does it mean that you're no good? That your artwork is no good? That you should just give up? No, it just means that gallery owner, maybe they just didn't dig your art, or they figured like, I can't sell this to the people that collect art here.
Yeah, it simply means you're not a good fit. And the same goes for commissions, working with people on pieces, working in group settings. Like sometimes you're a good fit, sometimes you're not a good fit.
Yeah. And it all comes down to the aesthetics of the person that's looking at it and whether or not they like it or not. And there is no one out there that is the end-all, be-all expert in everything art that can actually look at your art and say, like, this is no good. It just doesn't work that way. What is no good to someone else is brilliant to another person. So art is too subjective in order for us to be too worried about someone saying, I don't like it.
Absolutely. Okay, let's talk about making a perfect mess and the art studio, your creative space. We've had a lot of versions of the art studio over the years. Several sizes, several arrangements, full of several mediums and equipments and all kinds of things. And you open the section by talking about these pristine visions of an art studio that you see on social media. And I wanted to add to that, I'm familiar with those pristine visages of an art studio,
Right.
along with a pristine artist. And I'm looking at these images and I'm like, okay, first of all, dude, good for you. Dude or dudette, good for you.
Right.
Like, you're on point with your
Right.
social media. You look good. Your art studio looks good. Good on ya. But I'm just going to be honest and tell the whole world that's listening right now. We're sitting in the studio recording this audiobook commentary. The studio is a gnarly mess.
It is.
Right now.
It is. There are paintings and paints everywhere. Nothing is organized. I mean, things are organized, but like every surface is covered in like paints. We did an Arteza video, and there's Arteza paints everywhere, and open acrylics and other paints and varnishes. And there's also like 5 paintings that are just stacked up against an easel.
Yeah. In addition to that, my bench looks like an explosion happened because I'm in between commissions and also trying to organize some materials. And I've got a little random display case that's out because I need to pull a necklace out of there for a customer. And we've got some piles of mail going on. And on top of that, I'm here in jammy pants.
Yeah.
Relaxing, comfy. So it's not the super bohemian vista that you might expect, but it is our sacred space. And I think the most important thing, no matter what the evolution of your studio is, from working out of a suitcase to a
Right.
little corner of a room to a garage to, for us, what it is now, which is creative chaos, but there is a method to the madness.
Oh yeah, exactly. I mean, we have a full studio. In the book, I lay out like what kind of things I have and what's needed. Like, you want to make sure you have a sink and you have all these things, and you want to have a writing surface or a painting surface and easels and your paint supplies, and obviously storage. Storage is very, very important. But I think the main thing that I wanted to emphasize is that it does not matter what your creative space looks like to anyone else. What matters is that you do give yourself that sacred space, that you do give yourself that creative space, even if it is a bin under your bed of art supplies that you pull out to use in your room.
Absolutely. And that the people around you respect the sacred nature of your space and that your space inspires you. We have an artist friend who, since time immemorial, has been using her dining room table as a work surface. We met her almost at the very beginning of our career. It's just where she works. It's in the center of the house. She can keep an eye on all the things. And her partner is very supportive and understands that the dining room is what it is.
Right.
It's her studio.
Right.
And they eat their meals elsewhere. and it works for her.
But we also know artists that try to set up their sacred space, and whoever they're with
doesn't respect it.
Doesn't understand it.
And you've experienced that in your life.
Yeah, I've experienced that too. And that's why no matter what, I would say that as an artist, and this is going to be one of those comments that people are going to take however it is that they take it. But as an artist, what comes first, what really, really matters is that you have your space to create. And if you are with somebody who is not supportive, then they need to live outside. They need to go outside. I mean, it's simple as that. Like, you have your space needs to be respected.
And this is something you understand wholeheartedly as an artist. And people who aren't necessarily in that lifestyle, I've seen their minds just blown by this concept. I remember someone asking you when you were describing our art studio and how our art studio is the biggest room in the house. It's supposed to be the living room, but we were like, we don't need a living room. Like, this is the art studio. And I remember them asking you, like, whoa, Rafi, like, how'd you pull that one off with the missus?
Yeah, exactly.
And you were like, well, she's an artist too, so
yeah, she works in the art studio too.
It was actually a mutual idea. But it's like understanding the importance of that the space inspires you, that others respect it, that it is your sacred space.
Yeah, you know what's hilarious is that we don't have a large place that we live in, right? And yet the biggest room is I think of a lot of these people that have contacted me. They have like a whole house, like a giant house, and they're like, "Well, I don't really have any room for my art supplies or my art studio." And I'm like, "You got an entire living room that gets used maybe like once." Up in Illinois, what did we had? We had a foyer and a dining room and a living room.
Yeah, in the
and
Midwest, you have the formal living room, which gets used on holidays for after meal tea and coffee, and then you have the living room, the den, the family room where the people actually hang out. Yeah.
All of those rooms would be part of the art studio, and if people want to hang out, they could either hang out in the art studio or we could barbecue outside. That's my thought.
Absolutely. I think also, I mean, the really important things here that we've learned, that you've known over the years, is like, build what you need. It's your space. Like, our studio's constantly changing because you're constantly building stuff.
Right.
And then taking stuff apart and building it differently. And it makes it not only interesting, but seriously functional.
Yeah. Yeah, it needs to keep evolving. You need to keep changing, because even with the kind of art that you're working on, like, that's going to keep evolving. That's going to keep changing. If you decide that you're going to do your own prints, you're going to get a printer. You want to make sure that you have room for that, for the supplies. And you also don't want to take away from other creative endeavors that you want to do. And then there are some creative endeavors that you might be like, I think I'm going to put that on a shelf for a while.
Yeah, being willing to like declutter or remove stuff that like maybe you have that you thought you were going to do something with, but it turns out nah.
Yeah.
I think it is great to every so often do a declutter and reset the studio between projects, but also, like you said, keep a variety of materials because you never know what you're going to need. Rafi often finds me in here, or he'll look up from whatever he's doing, and I'm like foraging through his end of the studio, looking for drafting supplies for a sketch I'm doing, looking for varnish, for display components, looking for this, looking for that. And he's like, what are you looking for? Or I'll find him at my bench because he happens to need a steel block or a saw for something, and I have them. So there's a lot of crossover there. We have a lot of things, clay making tools, all kinds of things to express ourselves.
And I mean, and that's the fun part of having a room. If you have a room that's dedicated to your art, make sure that you have enough storage so you could store other materials and stuff just to have fun, because ultimately that's what it matters. Too many people get used to working on one thing, and they think that that's the way of an artist. And honestly, artists are constantly experimenting with materials and constantly pushing outside of their comfort zone and just trying new things, because you never know. The way that we treat the studio and the way that we describe it, it's our creative playground.
It totally is.
This is our creative playground. This is where we get to come in and play and create things. And yeah, it's awesome because we get to make a living doing that. But essentially, we get to, without the innovation of getting in here and playing with new stuff that we've not done before, things are not going to grow.
Absolutely. And the studio is a living, breathing entity that changes and grows with us.
It does. It's interesting because in the book, I do lay out all these things, like have an easel, have this, cover the floors, have water where you could like clean your brushes and stuff, and like have all these things. But really, when it comes down to it, your studio is your creative space, and it is your opportunity to create something that is you, that really, really works for you. I know that my studio would not work for somebody that doesn't like to be surrounded by stuff, by artistic stuff.
Sure, there's definitely stuff everywhere.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in here.
As well as relics from our history of getting to this point where we are,
right.
that remind us of things and inspire us.
Which is the irony. I don't think I actually put that in the book, to surround yourself with things that inspire you and things that really, really motivate you to keep going and moving forward. Like I have like posters up from like when I was the featured artist. We have stuff from when we were traveling. We have pictures. I have a ribbon up there. We've got all kinds of things in the studio that just really remind us of how much of a creative badass we are, because I think it's necessary that when you have a space that you do have a creativity wall, at least, that reminds you of how awesome you are.
Also, we have some art pieces that other awesome artists have sent us or that we've bought to remind us of our awesome artist community.
Yeah, I've got a portrait piece over there from Kelly Stir. We've got this portrait piece of both of us from Anna.
Yep.
We are surrounded by art and creativity in here, and I think that that's important. That's one of the reasons that those like pristine art studios that like don't have anything on the walls, I'm like, that's so weird to me. Like I don't get it.
There's something in my mind, I'm like, well, there's something to be said for that, I guess, is like your whole space is a blank canvas full of potential.
Yeah.
And our studio looks very lived in. I guess that's what you would say.
Yeah, I guess maybe that's why I don't buy it, because I'm like, okay, so let me get this straight. You put on makeup, did your hair, just so that you could sit in front of the easel and take this picture where like the shirt that you're wearing matches the borderline of the background. This is a very beautiful photograph. And then I forget that, like, oh yeah, it's social media. A lot of people take a lot of time to do really, really good photography on social media. So I'm not bashing it. It's just, I think we have made a name for ourselves being completely authentic. And so I think that also means that I look like a slob a lot of times in my pictures when I'm working on a painting, because it's just a snapshot of me in that moment doing whatever. I don't have time to like get a real pretty picture put up. It's
well,
just,
you don't look like a slob, but you don't. There's not a whole lot of pre-planning.
yeah, it's just me like telling you like, hey, I'm gonna hold this painting up outside, and I need you to take a picture and use that weird filter that you have on your phone because it looks good.
Because my phone is only 3 years old versus your phone, which is like 25 years old.
It's still good.
Yeah.
It's still good. My phone's still good.
The last thing I'll say about the studio before we move on is try to keep the whack energy out of your studio.
Yes.
Whether that's somebody, we've on a couple of occasions accidentally allowed some whack energy into the studio and did everything we could to quickly remove the whack energy.
By whack energy, she means like a person sometimes.
Yeah. Sometimes. It hasn't happened very often,
No.
but on occasion. And it's often, in fact, 0% of the time was it ever one of our collectors or patrons.
Right.
It'll be like a friend of a friend of a friend or some person that a family member brought along with them, and we're like, whoa.
Yeah,
so-
then at that point, usually I'm like, all right, well, it's time to end this pretty good. And then we turn on music and we brighten up the studio and we make things happy again, because that's important.
Absolutely. Okay, let's talk about the daily habits and thoughts of a madman.
Yes.
I love this section because it sort of outlines your daily modus operandi
Yeah.
and what's going on externally and what's going on internally. And some of these points are things that I also implement every day, and some of these are things that I've over time learned are helpful to implement every day, and some of them I'm complete rubbish at, but I'm working towards an end goal, and some of them could use a little more focus. For this section, I took little personal notes on like things that I found helpful about each one of those things, or just thoughts that I had. In the beginning, you illustrate the romantic bohemian image of being an artist versus what can often be the reality of being an artist. And it's not that the reality of being an artist is necessarily humdrum, but it's certainly not a diffuse glow image of like a French cafe at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
with glasses of wine or whatever they happen to be drinking. Sometimes there's twinkle lights and often there's philosophical conversation, and sometimes there's bourbon.
Yeah. I think what's interesting about that is that when you stop and you think about it in your life, how many artists have you known that were working artists? And how many portraits of artists on TV have you seen? What an artist was supposed to be, or how they used to be, or whether an artist is in a movie and what they're like. And it's almost like there is this romanticism that comes with being an artist. And I have a feeling that the romanticism doesn't really work with what it really means to be an artist. You know, the portrayal of somebody in a movie versus like what a real artist is.
So I didn't know any legitimate full-time working artists until I became a full-time working artist, with the exception of one guy in Chicago who I took some classes from, some mask making classes. He was a full-time working artist, super down-to-earth dude, just an intrinsic mentor. But I knew a lot of people that they were not full-time working artists. They were not producing work. They were
Right.
not generating any revenue.
And
But
by
they were living this lifestyle of like, so I had a friend who was a writer. And I was like, well, what does your day look like? I was getting to know him, right? He smoked about 1 billion cigarettes. He stared out the window. He would go for walks, listen to music. And I was like, well, what have you written? Well, nothing.
Right.
It's all up here, you know? So there was this lifestyle. Meanwhile, he was working a job that he didn't want to work and not writing. And I was like, okay, so you've got the like bohemian lifestyle happening,
right.
but you're not writing.
And I think that that's what I was trying to illustrate there, because the early part of my life was all about wanting this romanticized bohemian lifestyle, life of an artist, right? Of what I thought an artist was going to be. And so like a lot of times I would play that out even though I had a job. Now the difference is it's not about making revenue and being an artist, that being your thing, because there are plenty of artists that don't approach this as a career thing.
Yeah.
But they produce a lot of art because they're passionate about it, and maybe it's a hobby or whatever it is that they want to call it. Those people I consider artists, and usually those people are not bohemian dramatic. The difference was back in the day, I had my corporate job, and I had maybe in a span of 10 years created like 3 to 4 to 5 pieces, if even that. Those were my opus. And those were the things that, like, when I'd sit there and have artistic, philosophical conversations with my other artsy friends that were also not producing any art or doing anything like that. We were sitting there talking about like, the man and how they don't want us to like, there was all this like conversation that would take place, and a lot of smoking cigarettes and a lot of either drinking coffee or drinking alcohol. But as far as the actual production of art, that wasn't really happening.
Right. And I would say that that's perhaps the singular criteria that I would lay out in order to call yourself an artist.
Yeah.
Is that you make art.
It's one of the reasons that when I talk about how do you want to create a career, you're an artist, create art. That's number one. Mm-hmm. The number one thing is, if you are an artist, you are creating art. And it doesn't mean that you got to be creating 30 pieces a month. You could be creating 1 piece a month. But if you're an artist, you are creating work. If you want to become an artist that makes a career, makes money off of it, then you got to put it out there.
Absolutely. And so real life, everyday art life takes all shapes and sizes, for sure.
Right.
But I found these practices helpful, and a lot of them, especially like if you do make a go of this and once business starts to pick up, managing it all can be like somewhat stressful and it can seem overwhelming. Or if things are maybe not picking up and you're not really sure what direction you're going, I just like these basic things that you have laid out. Meditation in the morning.
Oh yeah.
Which I'm not good at meditating. I'm going to be that guy.
Oh, no.
I'm not practiced at meditation because I'm not consistent. And really like
Can I say something to that?
Yes.
You do realize that meditation in of itself is called a practice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's no like, I gotta be this proficient at meditation by this time next year. It's just that I would like to actively be practicing meditation
Right.
daily. So that's a helpful reminder, because and the reason is not so that I can gain accolades or tell people that I'm really great at meditating. It's because my day legitimately seems to go better when I've cleared my thoughts in the morning.
Well, yeah. I mean, you think about it. You wake up in the morning and immediately you've got brain chatter going on, and like you've got these things. And last night you were thinking about what it was that you were going to work on in the studio, and then you have stuff written down, and you've got everything, and la la la. You've got all this stuff going on in your head, and being able to stop and pause before you actually get into your day and really disseminate the information by clearing your mind. That is legitimately very, very important to do on the daily, because you could easily get overwhelmed. You could easily get stressed out. Your mind could be going off on some downward spiral when it comes to money or time or whatever it is that's going on. And you and I both know that when your mind goes into those downward spirals, you are completely unproductive in the studio.
Oh, yeah, a whole day could go by and I'll just have been dwelling on something.
Yeah, and then towards the end of the day, all you're thinking is like, I wasted my day.
I'm a loser.
And then you wake up the next day, and that's part of the thoughts that you got to meditate out is, you wake up in the morning and you're like, I wasted yesterday. I'm probably going to waste today.
I hope I don't. Yeah, it's very helpful. The next thing that you mentioned is to create something every day. And I think that that's a really good practice. And because you could not. The alternative to creating something or doing something creative every day is to not. And there's two reasons that I find that sometimes I don't. And one is because I'm just not feeling it, which has a lot to do with brain chatter.
Right.
And the other reason is that when you're running a full-time business, you can get really bogged down in the admin side of it. So,
absolutely.
By the time you're done tracking your financials and your books and the taxes, by the time you're done checking and sorting through email and responding to the ones that need responding to, by the time you're done packaging and sending out orders, by the time you're done putting away materials, and in my case, updating your materials inventory price spreadsheet, next thing you know, it's like late in the day and I haven't even sat down to make anything.
Yeah, I mean, today I spent an hour talking to the people from the website to figure out what I could do about those fraudulent charges, people trying to purchase stuff on our website, and updating the website and updating these pages and listing products online and doing. There is so much more that comes with running a business that it is very, very easy to just get into the managing of the business and forget why you started this thing in the first place.
Absolutely. So then I found myself at times in a state of like, okay, well, I have these orders and I have, I don't know, maybe an hour now at this point, maybe 2 hours to sit at the bench and actually make jewelry. And I'm going to make these orders. And it's easy to start to feel like I'm never going to get caught up. I'm never going to be able to work on this series. But if you're making that time every day, to not just do admin, to do something creative, or not telling yourself that you don't have the motivation, just do 5 minutes if you have 5 minutes.
Yeah, the Fachunking rule works really, really well with this in particular, because if you just give yourself 5 minutes to work on something, and you don't have to create a masterpiece, it could be a sketch or just an idea for something or something creative. As long as you are flexing those creative muscles daily, there's an evolution there that takes place. And not only that, but you teach yourself that your creativity is a priority because you're willing to stop everything else just so that you could create for 5 minutes. There's something that happens in our brain when we do that, where our creativity becomes a priority.
Absolutely. I experience it all the time. And I went from, with Fachunking, I went from picturing, okay, I have this thing I want to work on, or I have this thing I need to work on. I know it's going to take me 3 hours. And oftentimes I'd be like, well, I'm just not even going to start today.
Right.
Because I don't have 3 hours. So day after day after day of that, and a week goes by and you still haven't done this thing.
Right.
Because you don't have a 3-hour block of time.
Yeah, and the problem is that in that moment, in those moments, that thing becomes less of a priority, and everything else that you're doing in your mind becomes a priority. Whereas if you make it a point to do that every day and creating becomes your priority, that's where the evolution takes place, where eventually you start to realize I'm kind of busy with all this admin stuff. And really, what takes priority here is my creative side. So that means I may have to hire someone to take care of these things.
Absolutely.
And that's where when you start getting busy with business, then you start taking the next step to making more time for yourself for creating.
And I'm going to skip over one because that goes beautifully into planning your day and the Fantastic Four list. I've been using this consistently for years. I need to write things down. If I don't write things down, I'm going to forget about somebody's commission, or I'm going to forget to send this email. I write everything down because there's nothing worse than going, oh, when did I email that guy?
Yeah.
Oh, when is that thing due? When did we go here and talk to so-and-so and not having it?
Yeah.
So I write down everything I do, even if it's after the fact, and I keep a Fantastic Four list, and I try not to fill up my whole page with things, but sometimes I do. But also, it's a good way to keep yourself on track and not get overwhelmed and not get confused and not forget about anyone's stuff.
Right.
And it's also, as you said, a good barometer for seeing what percentage of things you're doing. So like if I notice that for a couple of weeks straight, mostly what I've done looking in my planner is administrative stuff, and I haven't worked on jewelry or music or anything like that, I know, like, okay, I'm going to need to try to shift gears. And I'm going to backtrack to writing or sketching all of your harebrained ideas down, which I also do. And simply put, do it. And do it immediately. Write your ideas down, or you risk losing them forever. I don't care if it's 4 a.m. or if you're in the shower.
Write it all down. The Artist Survival Guide is basically an amalgamation of years and years of me writing harebrained ideas down, or writing concepts that when I had an aha moment that I was like, oh my goodness, writing it down, because you're able to always refer back to it, and at some point in time you're going to be looking back at that idea and say, okay, I've got this idea, or here's this new concept that I want to really start to contemplate, or here's this thing. Like when you have those moments of a spark of creativity that goes into your head, whether or not you think it's a harebrained idea or not, write it down.
Absolutely. And in addition to that, I would add, if you did something excellent that you love, if you made something great, for me as a jewelry artist, if I made something excellent that I love and I might want to produce something similar in the future, I sketch an outline of it and I write down how I did it.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised how easy it is when you're producing a lot of work to forget how you did something.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I have sketchbooks where I have the entire color palette mapped out of some of my series, and exactly what the mixture was of one paint with a certain medium. Unless I write it down, I've created thousands of pieces of work. For the most part, I can't remember what I did with the last 2 pieces, let alone try and reproduce something that I hadn't created in a month.
Absolutely. And there's nothing worse than I'm sitting there, it's time to make a pair of earrings, and I'm like, oh, what gauge wire did I use? What size drill bit goes here? And which block did I hammer this out on? Because it makes a difference. And then trying to figure it out and reinvent the wheel. Okay, defining success for yourself is the next one you talk about, which is hugely important in my mind, as one person's definition of success is not another's. We recently made some decisions about which direction we might head, and we got a mixed bag of responses, largely supportive, and then some people who were like, I thought you guys were successful, this makes me so sad, and we're like, this is the next evolution of our success.
Right.
So it's really important that you define what success means for you. And not only because logistically that will help you stay focused on what you're trying to do, but also because it's really easy to get deflated if the whole world agrees that you need to make $1 million before you can call yourself successful, and you haven't yet done that. I celebrated my first sale of a piece of jewelry ever, which, by the way, I sold for $5 at an estate sale, is a huge success because it was the first time that someone had purchased some of my jewelry.
Yep.
It was awesome. And I just about fainted the first time I sold a necklace at the flea market for $60. I just couldn't even believe it was happening. And that was a huge success.
I know. When I sold my first work of art, I think I sold the first one for like $10. I was over the moon. I was like, wow, this is amazing. What's interesting about that is that recently I got a YouTube comment where somebody was like, I don't even understand how you were able to sell something for $10. And what was interesting about that is that person that made that comment, when I asked them about, well, what would you suggest or whatever, their answer to me was, well, I haven't really sold anything yet. So it's like this predetermined idea of what success means that has nothing to do with somebody actually getting out. To me, somebody is successful what makes them successful is them putting themselves out there. I don't care how much money they're making or whether or not they've got $1 million in the bank or whether or not they got into a show or they didn't get into a show. It is just the act of actually doing something that a lot of people shy away from doing because they're too scared to do it. That to me is success.
Absolutely. It's really not about money. It's really not about accolades. We had this conversation recently. Snap forward to today. My definition of success for myself, and yours probably differs slightly from mine, but we're pretty much on the same page here, is I don't even care if I'm ever recognized as a good jeweler, right? Or if I ever win any awards for jewelry. It's not even about jewelry or what I do. My definition of success is I'm living a good life right now. Yes, I'm happy my bills are paid, but do I feel happy and fulfilled in what I'm doing? And do I feel like I'm putting some joy out into the world? Do I feel like I'm touching people's lives?
I am an award-winning artist. I have several awards for my art, right? I can't eat them.
No.
I can't spend them. I can't even wipe my butt with them.
I mean, it would be difficult.
Well, some of them, maybe the ribbons. And it's not something that I've ever used as accolades other than I put it in my name because I'm like, well, that's kind of fun. I'm an award-winning artist.
Sure.
As far as like really inflating the meaning of that, I'm happy that I won them, but they really haven't changed anything as far as whether or not I see myself as successful.
Absolutely.
I had to face that the first time that I got into a gallery, because immediately I got into the gallery and there was this part of me that was like, no, I have reached success because
I have made it.
I am in a gallery. And then after being in the gallery for a while, I was like, this is bullshit. Like that. I don't want to be in this gallery. Like this is not, I don't feel successful. It has everything to do with your own definition, not what other people think. There are so many people out there that follow in a path in their life that they did not want to do because maybe their father did it and their grandfather did it before them. It was going to be the same thing for me of going into the family business and that's what's expected of you and this is what success is. And honestly, I've seen a lot of lawyers and doctors do the same thing, get into a career, not because that's what they wanted, but because that's what was expected of them, because that was what the definition of success was. And really, the definition of success is just like art. It's completely subjective to the person that is having the experience.
And it evolves as the artist evolves. Admittedly, so growing up and for most of my life, success meant wealth, accolades, recognition. And so early on, I wanted wealth and recognition. I craved those things.
Right.
It was a huge shift to understand, like, that's an abstract goal that's really not making me feel great about today. And since today is so far the only day that's guaranteed to me, like, what am I doing with my right now? And how am I feeling about what I'm doing? And what is the legacy, if you even want to use the word legacy, that I want for myself? Do I want to be known as an excellent world-renowned jeweler? I wouldn't say no to that, but is that what I'm working for? No, it's not. I don't need $1 million. Do I like that I can pay my bills? Yes, I like being able to pay my bills. I like having a comfortable life, but mostly I want to feel happy and fulfilled right now.
I think that right there just describes something that's really, really important, because a lot of times when we look at somebody in the media, the people that we consider successful are people that are making millions of dollars, right? So the $1 million mark is the mark that for a lot of people, they think that that's what it means to be successful. Or being known and coming out in the newspaper or coming out in the news or being in a movie. There are all these other criteria of being famous and being wealthy, and one of those two things making you successful. Well, there's lots of people out there that were famous and had a full-on career, and then their career just kind of went through this roller coaster. There's lots of people out there who were known for having money at one point and then didn't have money and then had money again.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting about that is that because it is a huge amount of fame or a huge amount of money, the bar for what it means to be successful, according to society, is way up there. And for some reason, we hold that standard to ourselves. And really, a lot of times, just open your eyes and take a look. You can look at somebody that has a lot of money and they're not living a happy life. They just don't. To me, they're not successful. I've seen a lot of actors out there that are very famous and their entire personal life falls apart. To me, that's not success. Like, success is being in a place where you enjoy waking up every day.
Feeling fulfilled.
Exactly.
Feeling joyful. And for me, really, legacy, spreading some joy into the world, spreading some brightness.
Yeah.
Making other people feel good too, making people feel like I feel good that I met those people.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, unless you're an evil villain, because if you're an evil villain, I would imagine that success for you would be like spreading darkness and unhappiness in the world, and then you might be really good at that. It doesn't require you to be a millionaire, you know?
I suppose so.
I want to speak to all groups.
Okay, so let's talk about change your mind if you want to, damn it. And I don't want to spend too much time on this one, but I may change my mind part of the way through. Sometimes I need to remind myself that I can change everything if I decide to. Sometimes I need to remind myself that I could quit this whole art thing and walk away and go live in the desert if I chose to.
Yes.
Not because I'm necessarily going to do it, but I need to remind myself that I could.
You can change your mind. You are not required to do something simply because that's what you stated that you were going to do. I remember one of the reasons that I really wanted to put this in there is because I've seen, and I have also been in the past, I've been somebody that would sit there and argue a point. Halfway through the argument, I would not necessarily agree with the point that I was making, but I would dig my heels in, because at that point, if I changed my mind, then I would look wishy-washy.
Mm-hmm, and nobody wants to be wishy-washy. That's a socially agreed upon thing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think what's interesting about that is that when you change your mind, you are not being wishy-washy is, I don't know, do I do this one or do I do... You haven't made up your mind about anything.
Right.
So you can't change your mind. And I've seen people just not know how to respond when I'll look at them and say, oh, you know what? I just said that. I don't agree with what I just said. I changed my mind.
Yeah. Or they make a point and you're like, you know what? I think I agree. I'm changing my mind based on what you said.
Yeah. And it's turned into this whole thing of I want to win. Mm-hmm. Instead of just getting to the truth of how you feel.
It's I want to win, and it's also become this thing of like, once you say it, you better stand by it forever.
Yeah.
Because people are going to call you out on it if you change your mind down the road. We've experienced that on the YouTube channel because humans don't work that way. We change our mind as we have new life experience.
Yeah, we change, we evolve, we grow, we have different experiences, and it causes us to have a different perspective. Like, it's ridiculous to think that we're just like a one note going down this long, winding road, and that we wouldn't change our perspective.
Right. And we've had people say, well, I thought you said a couple years ago that blah, 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 blah. And we're like, yeah, that's what we said a couple years ago. Now we said this about the same topic. And I really loved it when we got one particular question on YouTube, which was, you did this video a few years back about this topic, and I would love to know your evolved perspective from a new vantage point on this same topic. How has your opinion of this changed?
Yeah.
Because this person knew that what we would say would be different. And I thought, that's awesome. I've had friends be like, well, I can't say that because I don't know how I feel about it. So then what if I figure out how I feel and I already said this thing? And I'm like, then you just say that you changed your mind,
Yeah.
or that you weren't sure. But I've had to do this with myself too, because I used to be afraid to say anything for sure, in case I was wrong or in case I changed my mind.
Right.
And it's learning that you're allowed to do that because you're a dynamic human. And if anyone's going to hold you to something you said and not allow for that change or that evolution, then that's their problem. That shows their rigidity, not yours.
We have our brain, and we have these things that we think in our brain, and we're like constantly evolving and evaluating and thinking and evolving and thinking and evaluating and having different experiences and stuff, right? And then we use these words, and words are basically just these weird utterances of sound that we've all determined that one sound means this and this combination of sounds means that. But in all honesty, not every word could really cover exactly what it is that you are feeling and thinking. There's a limitation of words. So to sit there and say that this weird utterance of sound that just came out of your mouth is definitely written in stone,
Henceforth, it defines you.
Henceforth, yeah, exactly. It defines you, is absolute and complete rubbish. It just doesn't make, when you look at it through the eyes of common sense and through the eyes of like, people evolve, people grow, people have different experiences, people meet different people that inspire them. Obviously, you have every right in the world that even within the same exact conversation that you're having, you could change your damn mind.
Absolutely. You could change what you think. You can change what you do. You can add to what you're doing. You could subtract things from what you're doing. You could completely 180 and change directions. And
don't ever allow it to be used as a weapon against you. I think that was the biggest thing that I wanted to say in this chapter is like, because people are going to try to hold you to it, and you could just tell them like, I have every right to change my mind.
That's not how those are those friends that are like, we don't even know you anymore.
Yeah, we don't know you anymore. It's like, well, you never really knew me. You don't even know yourself. What are you going to say that you don't even know me anymore?
Okay, let's go to hydrating, eating, and napping. Do those things.
Yes.
Take care of yourself. I think that's enough said. Self-care, especially if your business is booming. And we know a bunch of artists who have a thriving, very bustling art business, and sometimes self-care can be the issue.
Yeah.
Take the time to take care of yourself because you need to. It's part of the whole recharging your batteries thing.
Physically, emotionally, all of it. Just take care of make that a priority in your art business, to just take that time to eat a good meal, drink lots of water, and get some me time.
Mm-hmm. Whether it's taking a nap or taking a walk or taking whatever.
Yeah, whatever it is, you determine it for yourself. I'm not going to tell you what to do.
Yeah. Learn from your mistakes. Don't wallow in them. I love that you said you made a mistake. You're not the mistake. I'm trying to change the habit of berating myself repeatedly when I make mistakes. And of course, depending on the size of the mistake, it sort of determines the length of time that I might berate myself for making said mistake and identify with it. This mistake means I'm a bad person. This mistake means I'm dumb. This mistake means I'm a coward.
Right.
And identifying yourself actually as the mistake instead of, whoops, I botched that, but that's not who I am, and I'm going to learn what I can from it.
Yeah, you made a mistake. You are not the mistake. The reason I have it on the Daily Habits of a Madman is because it is something that you have to reevaluate every day, because every day we make micro mistakes, whether it is, oh, I didn't call so and so, I should have called them, or why did I trust this person? Now this transaction didn't go well, or whatever it is that's going on. A lot of times it's easy for us to identify with the fact that either A, we're stupid, oh, I'm just stupid, I don't know anything about business, or I'm just blah, blah, blah. And you make these blanket statements that are supposed to cover who you are, but they're like the worst self-talk in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're calling yourself shit for a mistake. And it's a mistake. It's not you. You just made a mistake. Everyone makes mistakes. That's how they learn how to get to where they are.
Most definitely. Today I was sending out mail and I forgot to send out one piece of mail with the other things that were going out. And I had this propensity to be like, it's because I'm not organized. I'm not a good business person. I'm not as on task as I think. It's one piece of mail that will go out tomorrow.
Yeah, it'll go out tomorrow. It's stuff like that when it happens that you're like, oh, crap. Okay, what can I do to make sure that this doesn't happen like this again? Or even, you know what, it's fine this time. This doesn't typically happen, but I'm going to take care of it next time.
Absolutely. And finally, remember who I actually am. And I think this is your overall barometer. This is like your mission statement. Don't get lost in the details of what you do, mistakes or accolades. I am not a jeweler. I am a jeweler, but that's not who I am. I'm not the peanut gallery on our YouTube channel. That's not how I define myself. I'm a human being pursuing things.
I think a lot of times we get used to identifying with the labels that we give ourselves or that other people give us, especially that other people give us, because for the most part, it helps with the hierarchy of society, right? So if you are a manager, then you're up at this level over a supervisor. If you are a district manager, then you're up at this level. You're a tier up higher than the manager. If you're a managing director, then you're here, and like, it's almost like then you identify with this label, and the words that we use is, I'm a manager. Like, that's what I am. What do you do? I'm a manager. What do you do? I'm an artist. What do you do? I'm a musician. There are these titles that we label ourselves because in some way, shape, or form, it brings us the ability to be able to really identify with what it is that we are. And it brings us a sense of pride.
Yeah.
If I have this good job and this is what I am, or I'm this aloof person and this is what I am, it brings us a sense of pride. And really what it comes down to is it becomes a very limiting character because you are constantly moving and changing and evolving.
Absolutely. It can also make things feel very heavy and serious, and it can also make you feel completely lost when it goes away.
Yes.
I used to self-identify as one of the front men for the band I was in. I also self-identified as a member of this creative team that did this volunteer work.
Yeah.
I also self-identified with a specific group of people that I associated with. Those were my world. That's how I identified myself. At one point, all of that went away. And I felt for a time lost. I could easily get lost in what I'm doing now with the many things that we're doing. If that all went away, then who would I be?
Right. You lose your identity. And I think that's the main thing that I wanted to say there. And it's one of the reasons I have it on the daily habits of a madman is because this is something that I check in with myself all the time, because it's easy. And it's not just like your job. It could be anything. It could be your hair. Listen, I identified with my hair for a long time and then it started falling out. Oh my goodness. My entire world started to end. I could identify with the kind of clothing that I have. I could be my car. Basically, if you take the word identify out of it and you're like, I am my car, I am my hair, I am my relationship, I am my this, I am my that. I have to constantly check in with myself because I adore you, but I want to make sure that I don't identify as just Rafi as part of the Rafi and Klee team.
Right.
I don't want to just identify myself as an artist. I don't want to just identify myself as someone who's on YouTube. I don't want to just identify myself as someone who has 22,000 followers. It is so easy to use these mile markers to identify and label yourself a thing so that when you're having conversation with other people,
They can relate to
they
you.
could relate to you. The problem is when you start to relate to yourself in that way. The only self-identity that really, really stays constant is I am a human being.
Yeah.
And that's only because we're all human beings, right? You could easily also say, like, I am an alien. I am just me.
I'm a human being who likes to have fun and spread joy into the world.
Yeah, you get to identify the labels that you want to be. And that's the thing. Like, we choose those labels for ourselves, even though other people might say that this is what you are. You are a smart person, you know, and then you start to, you are artistic, you know, when you're young, and then all of a sudden that's what you identify with. Well, I like art and I'm this. You're really quiet. You're really this. And you identify with these labels for yourself.
There's another reason I think this is important, and I don't know if I'll be able to explain it, but identifying with things like that, it's a trap.
Yeah.
So like if I'm a jeweler, if that's my primary thing, right? If I'm a jewelry artist, then what if I decide I want to walk away from that?
Exactly.
Also, I'm going to feel guilty anytime I'm pursuing or giving my time to anything but that. If I'm doing music, I'm sitting here doing this audiobook commentary with you that has nothing to do with jewelry. Then I'm looking at percentages. Well, I'm not devoting enough time to jewelry. I'm not far enough along in jewelry. I haven't won any awards for jewelry. I'm not pursuing this hard enough. If a jeweler is what I am, I'm definitely having some shortcomings there.
Right.
If a musician is what I am, well, then I should be devoting more time to music. I should be further along in my music career. I should be practicing more music. And then I should feel guilty about all the other things that I like to do. And I realized, like, I don't want any of those things as labels.
And that's where the issue comes in, because like a lot of people will call themselves something because they want to be able to identify themselves as those things. The fact is that when I started doing this as a career, like those labels were very, very important to me. Mm-hmm. I had never been an artist before. Oh my goodness, I'm an artist. I get to say that I am artist Rafi Perez. And then I won awards, and then all of a sudden I was award-winning artist Rafi Perez. And here was this label that was just getting longer. And then I was selling stuff internationally award-winning artist Rafi Perez. I had all these things that really identified who I was. And the moment that I was thinking about, well, I want to do t-shirts. I want to do our music.
And your little brain stick man was like, internationally acclaimed artists don't make t-shirts.
Yeah, you don't make t-shirts. You're an artist. You're not going. Why are you going to write a book? Artists don't write books. Go and create your art. So anytime that I started to think about something that I really, really wanted to do and dedicate that creativity to it, I was trying to pull away from that. And so it is something that I check in with myself daily, because I definitely do not want to put myself in that trap. I was in that trap for years in the beginning. That's why it's been 10 years and now Rafi writes a book. Mm-hmm. You know, now Rafi's thinking about putting his album out there. Now Rafi, within the last couple of years, Rafi started doing t-shirts. Now Rafi's referring to himself in the third person.
Which is okay. The last thing I wanted to say about that is that once you define for yourself, like, this is who I really am at my core, without all the external factors attached on, then is what I'm doing really in line with that authentic definition of who I am? It's sort of like not like a mission statement, but it's like a personal statement of self.
Yeah.
And then, is that part of who I am? If I decide to needle felt some little fluffy cute goggles, is that in line with who I am? Yes, very much so. It's not in line with Clee the excellent jeweler. It makes no sense.
Right.
But Clee, the fun-loving human who likes to spread joy into the world, yes, it absolutely makes sense to make fuzzy little cute needle-felted creatures.
Exactly. And I mean, the way that I identify myself, and one of the reminders for myself, is I am a creative human who loves to create fun, happy thought-provoking things that spread joy and light and happiness in the world. And my art is just one of the things that I do
in order to do that. But my art is not me. My music is not me. My YouTube videos are not me. Our podcast is not me. My book is not me. This is just something that I've created because I am a creative human. And really, that's the way that I've been able to identify myself in a way that just does not trap me. It gives me the freedom to be whoever I want, because that's not going to be taken away from me. If I identify as an artist, well, what if something happens and I can't create art anymore? Then all of a sudden I've seen so many people that lost their job and they identified themselves as their job. And the moment that they got fired, they were completely directionless and lost and did not know what to do with themselves. I've seen the same thing happen in retirement.
Yeah.
Recently, you had said that you were going to start telling people that what you do is have fun. And then I was going to follow it up with, it's a lot to manage, but luckily we have protocols in place to manage the fun.
Yeah, I think that it's brilliant to be able, one of the main questions that people ask you is like, what do you do? Like, what do they meet you, you're like, hey, nice to meet you. What do you do? They want to know what you do because they're so used to your job identifies your social status in the world.
Yeah.
Right? So like your social status, if you are, I am a politician, boom, immediately in your mind, you have a shelf that you put this person on. What side of it are they on? Then you have another shelf that you put him on. I am a manager at a Fortune 500 company. Boom, you have a shelf that you put him on. Mm-hmm. I'm a gas station attendant. Boom, you have a lower shelf that you put him on.
I have fun. And I have a huge variety of fun. Sometimes it's more fun than I can keep track of.
Exactly.
It's a lot of different fun. But we're pretty organized with our fun. So we do a good job. We're quite successful at fun.
And that right there, there is no shelf. There's no shelf for that. It's totally going to throw that yeah, but what do you do?
They're going to put you on the crazy shelf.
Yeah, and then you're going to be like, I have fun. I have fun for a living. That's what I do.
Yeah. So I think that this is always, like you said, a good daily practice to be looking at. And as you evolve, because as we discussed, humans are constantly evolving and changing, to be redefining that for yourself all the time.
Yeah, exactly. One of the reasons that I do this on the daily, a lot of the stuff on the list, and why I called it the daily ritual of a madman, right? Mm-hmm. Because essentially I'm calling bullshit on a lot of the standards of what expectation people have of you. Like, I'm just calling bullshit on it, because a lot of the way that we perceive the world and a lot of the way that we perceive ourselves is ridiculous. The idea that we'd identify ourselves with something, the idea that we would limit ourselves because we're afraid of rejection, the idea that we would think to ourselves that we can't calm our mind before we get our day started, think that we don't have enough time. A lot of the stuff that we think, all it takes is a little bit of questioning the status quo to really, really start to self-identify who it is that you want to be versus where it is that you fit in the world. I think a lot of us have spent our lives trying to fit in. I know that I tried to fit in with my family. I know that I tried to fit in school. I know that I tried to fit in my job. And this is the first time in my life that I am not trying to fit in to any group or any social status or anything. I just want to be me. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's the most important thing that I wanted to portray in this chapter.
It's kind of at the core of going rogue.
Yeah. I think that's pretty much it for this chapter. Let's move on to the next one.
Onward. Oh man, we're going into social media for the next section.
Yep. Social media. Get ready for it. And that concludes this section of the audiobook. Thank you so much for listening, you guys. If you would like, you can proceed to the next section. Have an awesome day. Adios.